My name is William Smith, and I'm a solutions architect for a company called 318. We're a consultancy based out of Santa Monica, California. Let's talk a little bit about Administering Office 2016 for Mac. Now, after rehearsing this over and over and over and getting better and better at presenting it, I've gotten this whole session really, really short. So feel free to ask questions in the middle. I'm not going to have a problem with that. If you would, I've been told, have you go up to the mic, so just wave your hands, work your way out, go up to the mic, and I'll be glad to wait for you so you can ask your question. Microsoft is releasing Office 2016 for Mac sometime later this year. We know this from back in March. Microsoft is discontinuing support for Office 2011 in January of 2016. We've known this since 2010. Serious. Every Microsoft product, including Office for Mac, has a product support lifecycle. This is a predetermined length of time that Microsoft will provide mainstream support for anyone in the form of product updates, security patches, and technical support. Here's a copy of the Office for Mac 2011 product support lifecycle, and this is where you're going to find that important date. Historically, Microsoft releases about 3 major service packs throughout the life of Office for Mac. Service packs generally include bug fixes as well as new features. After that, the product goes into maintenance mode, where it's going to receive periodic security updates, compatibility updates to keep up with OS X, and some more bug fixes. You generally won't see new features after the last service pack. By that time, the developers are already working on the next version of Office for Mac. The product support lifecycle is a useful tool for being able to predict the future a little bit. Another useful tool is history. How did Office 2016 for Mac get here? To understand the present, we need to look at the past. In the beginning, Steve Jobs created the Macintosh, and it was good. That was January 1984. And in April 1984, Microsoft released Multiplan. It was the very first third-party application for Office for Mac. Multiplan was later named Excel, and Excel made its debut on Macintosh. It didn't appear on Windows until 2 years later. Word also appeared on Macintosh in May of 1985. In 1989, Microsoft released the first version of Office for Mac Suite. 1989. It contained the 3 major applications we know and love today: Excel, Word, PowerPoint. 2 years later, Microsoft revved Office to support System 7 and Multifinder. And into the mid-90s, they continued releasing new versions. The late 80s and through the early 90s, though, were dark for Apple. Jobs had been let go. Windows was dominating the market. Gil Amelio had licensed Mac OS to clone manufacturers. And while the Newton had coined the phrase PDA in popular culture, it failed to reinvent the personal computing experience as promised. Apple purchased Steve Jobs' company Next and brought him back into Apple in 1986 as interim CEO, or as he liked to call himself, the iCEO. At Macworld Expo 1997, Jobs announced the Microsoft deal, a partnership where the company infused Apple with $150 million and made a 5-year commitment to develop Office and Internet Explorer for Apple, or for Mac. Bill Gates made a live appearance on the big screen that day, and he received a lot of boos. And I'm not talking free beer. It's very uncomfortable to watch that. But Jobs said some words which are pretty wise. He said, "We have to let go of this notion that for Apple to win, Microsoft has to lose." That same year, Microsoft founded the Macintosh Business Unit, or MacBoo, which would eventually become the largest Mac software developer outside of Cupertino. They also released Office 98 for Mac. 3 years later, Apple released OS X, a major architectural change. For a little while, MacBoo had to support both the Classic and now the Carbon operating systems simultaneously. That was Apple's design. Then, halfway through Office's next product development life cycle, Apple announced another major architectural change, a hardware shift from PowerPC to Intel. You can hear everyone at MacBoo just going, ah, not again, not again. This forced them to reprioritize their development, and one of the casualties of that change was the omission of VBA from Office 2008. It introduced, though, the first Apple installer package for Office. Later, in Office for Mac 2011, we saw the return of VBA, the first truly Cocoa app, Outlook, and lots of P-lists that we could manage. Since then, Microsoft has started embracing other platforms, including iOS and Android, and MacBoo was reorganized and renamed the Apple Product Experience Team, or APEX. Their primary objective for Office 2016 was to get all of the applications ported to Xcode, rewriting practically everything. Some of the code in the Office apps by this time was now 25 years old. If you've looked at Office for Mac, the preview, Office 2016, you're probably thinking it's just a facelift. For the Mac administrator, there's a lot that's different. We've got a lot to cover, but the good news is administering Office 2016 for Mac is simpler than any of the other earlier versions. However, parts of it are very different. We'll start by removing Office 2011 and then installing Office 2016. Then we'll examine what's different about the architecture to both Office in general and Outlook specifically, since Outlook is the most complex to manage. We'll look at all preferences and management and where to place shared files on a Mac for all users. And then finally, we're going to cover changes in scriptability and automation. Office 2011 was the first version of Office that didn't come with an uninstaller. What we had before that were .app removal tools that required someone with administrator privileges to double-click that application. They really weren't scriptable and they weren't silently executable, so frankly, the lack of an uninstaller isn't that much worse. The only way to programmatically remove Office 2011 and undo all of its stuff is to use a script. You can run scripts using Apple Remote Desktops and send Unix command, payload-free Apple installer packages through Casper's self-service or most any other Mac management tool that's available. The script must quit any running processes, move fonts, and delete several files. I don't recommend running it while a user is logged in. Instead, run the script while the Mac's sitting at a login window or as part of a login or a logout process when you know that none of the files are in use. I have two versions of a script to do all of this, a shell script and an Apple script. You'll find them at the URL below, and all of these presentations will be available for download, so don't bother trying to copy all of these URLs if you can't get them that fast. They'll be available later. That's all there really is, just use a script to remove Office 2011. So let's move on to installing Office 2016. Here's one of the ways that administering Office 2016 just got simpler. You don't need to uninstall Office 2011. You can run Office 2016 side by side with Office 2011. They share no common files and no common preferences. What they do share are common process names. So in Activity Monitor, if you see Microsoft Excel twice, or if you see Microsoft Outlook twice, it's because you're running both versions of the application. Therefore, if you do any kind of scripting or troubleshooting that calls applications by the process name, Be mindful that you call it by the full path to the application, or figure out some other way of knowing which process you're actually trying to tackle. Otherwise, for pilot testing Office 2016 in your environment, or for those users who insist that the next version of Office doesn't have that critical feature that they need to do their jobs, you can have applications from both versions installed and running at the same time. Rainbows and unicorns for everyone. Command line installation for Office 2016 works for the most part like it did for Office 2011. Please use this method for installing Office rather than manually installing it and then repackaging. Microsoft won't support repackaging, and it's not a clean way of doing things. For this to work, you have to have the installer package copied to a Mac. In this case, I've copied it to the Office Preview. I've copied this right here to Private Temp. Anybody can tell me why I've copied it to Private Temp? Yes? Exactly. If you copy items into the Private Temp folder, after your computer restarts, that folder is automatically emptied out. It's self-cleaning, just like an oven. This location is fantastic for any kind of transient files that you're going to be putting onto your Mac, not just this, but anything that you want to get rid of later. All right, so this that I'm showing you is a simple command and something every MacAdmin should get comfortable using because so many applications come in Apple installer packages. All right, so let's break it down a little bit. The sudo command means superuser do, or basically run as root. You have to have administrator privileges to install Office. The command we're using is called installer, and it lives in a hidden USR SBIN directory on your Mac. This is the equivalent of double-clicking a package file and running Apple's GUI installer application. Where you see these backslashes up here, I'm just noting that I'm breaking this one long command onto 3 lines. You don't have to have these backslashes if you put this in just one long line. So kind of ignore those, it's just for easier reading up here. I use the -PKG switch to denote that what's coming after it is the path to my package, or the Office Preview package. Again, I've copied Office Preview to the hidden Private Temp folder, and I'm giving it the full path to it. And then finally, I use target to denote where I'm installing the package, and the / means install here on this computer or the boot drive. Hit return, and in a couple of minutes you'll have Office installed. If you're running this command from your Mac to another Mac, you can do this without interrupting a user who's already logged in, or even better, you can do this without any user having to be logged in. Historically, updates to Office have also been combo updaters, and we shouldn't really expect that to change. That means one updater package should update all or most earlier versions of Office that you've already installed. So if you run the latest update, you may end up having to install just the installer and that combo update, possibly the installer, an interim service pack, and then the combo update. Rarely should you ever have to install more than 3 files to get a fully up-to-date version of Office. So remember the combo updaters. And Office updates come in Apple installer packages, just like the Apple Office installer itself. So you can run them just as you would install Office. With the Apple installer command line tool and Office 2011, we had the option of adding apply choice changes XML to a command line install. This allowed us to point to a plain text file with a little bit of XML information for telling installer, I want these applications installed. I don't necessarily want this stuff installed. It looks something like this. This is a simplified version or a view of the choice changes XML. And you can generate this using the Apple's installer command line tool. Don't worry about trying to read it, but do notice these 3 lines right here. By including those in the XML, I'd be modifying whether I install Outlook, as you can see on the bottom line. And then by default, the integer in the very first line would have been 1 to tell the installer, go ahead and install Outlook. But if I change the 1 to a 0, I'd be telling the installer, don't install Outlook. Is that simple enough? Does that make sense? All right. Forget it, though. This is the equivalent of double-clicking the Office 2011 installer and choosing the Customize option and deselecting Outlook. I'd have to deploy this file alongside my Office installer and call it at the same time I ran the installer. So I'm adding just a little bit more now to my command line installer. This is a great way to omit unwanted items such as fonts or proofing tools or link, something that not all of your users would necessarily have to have. And it also makes for a much cleaner install than deploying everything and then deleting after the fact. However, the Office 2016 Preview installer doesn't offer any choices. It's all or nothing. The choices are still there if you use the command line installer to look at everything, but if Microsoft doesn't offer the option in the GUI installer, then you probably shouldn't try to apply a choice changes file to the command line installer. Maybe they'll make that option available in the final release, or maybe they'll offer some sort of alternative to that. We'll see. Most folks won't care that everything gets installed, but some might once they see Office 2016's architecture. The most noticeable difference between Office 2011 and Office 2016 is their footprints. And I'm talking about the amount of drive space that Office uses. It's right there in the installer windows. Office 2011 consumes a little more than 1.5 gigs of drive space, whereas Office 2016 consumes nearly 6.5 gig. Yes?
So before you moved on, I wanted to just find out, I know with 2011 they packaged up, link and communicate with thing on when you got Office. With 2016, are they just focusing on the theme, I guess the 4 main apps now, Word, PowerPoint?
Good question.
Or are they going to be adding like Skype for Business, or is that going to be a separate?
It's a very good question. So what he's asking is, in the Office 2011 installer, and in particular what you're referring to is the volume license installer, Microsoft packages other things such as Link. Originally it was Communicator. They've got Microsoft Document Connection, a lot of things that were really kind of enterprise-centric. We don't know yet what Microsoft is going to do. All we can do right now is go by what's in the preview.
What's in the preview?
Yeah. We'll see that in just a second. So he just asked what's in the preview. I'll show you. All right, so we're looking at 1.5 gigs to nearly 6.5 gigs here. Those schools or other institutions that try to save money by buying those 128 gig MacBook Airs are going to see those drives fill up just a little bit faster. All right, so what's happening here? On the left side, you'll see Office 2011 installs into a single folder in the Applications folder, and then everything related to Office is installed inside. All right, note that the bottom folder in the Microsoft Office 2011 folder is simply called Office. It contains a collection of shared frameworks and other shared resources that each application uses. On the right, you'll see Office 2016, and it installs just the applications into the Applications folder. Everything that was in the old Office folder is now inside the application bundle here. And here, and here, and here, and here. Can anyone guess how big that Office folder in Microsoft Office 2011 is? About a gig. So adding to this, the 350 meg font collection with 155 Microsoft fonts that also got installed are also now in each application bundle. This has the advantage or the disadvantage that only the Office apps will be able to use these fonts. I come from the print and publishing industry, and personally I love this because I don't have to manage these fonts anymore. You might think differently. And SharePoint functionality that used to need browser plugins is now also built into the applications. Everything that had been scattered throughout the Mac system is now in each self-contained application. I probably know what's going through your mind right now. But if you think about it, these changes give us a few advantages which may outweigh these bloated application bundles. So, if you need to save disk space, you can just move the apps to another drive and run them from there. If you need to uninstall Office, just drag the applications to the trash and empty the trash. And self-contained applications can be sandboxed. The Office 2016 applications are sandboxed. Can anyone think of any other examples of applications that are both self-contained and sandboxed? What's that? I heard somebody say it, I thought. Go ahead. Not the applications themselves, but where you would find them. App Store. While Microsoft has made no announcements regarding the Mac App Store, they're perfectly poised to distribute individual applications this way. So I'm sure they'll have to weigh the ease and distribution of a larger audience with having to give up 30% of their revenue, but if they ever decide to go that route, they're ready. So if you remember our history lesson from earlier, Microsoft has struggled to keep up with Apple's frequent changes. Here's an example of where they're finally keeping up in the Mac App Store. Possibly. We'll see later where sandboxing may pose some challenges, though. Here's another example of how administering Office 2016 will be a little bit simpler. Microsoft has released prior versions of Office in about 15 languages. Let me make that a little bit clearer. They released 15 different installers of Office, one for each language. Office 2016 is now one installer localized for 15 languages. So to demonstrate this, I can open up the language and region systems preference and change my preferred language from English to French. Doing so changes my entire Finder interface, my system preferences, etc., from English to French. When I launch Word 2016 on the top, my ribbon and my menus and all of my dialogues are now in French. Conversely, when I launch my US English edition version of Word 2011, which you see on the bottom, everything is still in English. So if you support multiple languages or multiple countries, you only need to install one set of bits now to get those 15 languages. One last thing I'd like to mention is package receipts. These are commonly used by software deployment systems like Apple and Monkey, and they contain information about what the Apple installer left behind after it was run. I ran the PKG command, PKG util command on my laptop, where I've had Office 2011 installed since I purchased it roughly in late 2013. Can anyone guess how many receipts I had just for Office 2011? I heard a lot. Come on, give me numbers. Over 2 years, Microsoft has deposited nearly 1,000 uniquely named package receipts on my computer. Because they were all uniquely named, they were pretty useless to my deployment system. It saw every receipt as a unique install. If I run that same command on a computer that's only ever had Office 2016 installed, I see now a total of 10 package receipts even after applying updates. This list should give you a very good idea about what's in the Apple installer. We have our fonts, we have our frameworks, one set for the installer. We have auto update to keep everything up to date, and then our applications, proofing tools, and then the licensing architecture. Typically, we're going to probably see either with volume licensing or Office 365. That's all you should ever see going forward. I can run the PKG info option on any of these receipts, and I can get the current version number of the application along with the installer date and time and the Unix epoch time. And if I need to use, or if I need to know the date, I can actually take the install epoch time date and run the date command and find out. You'll see I was working on this pretty late up to the last minute here. But I can translate that to when the application was actually installed. All right, so let's spend a little bit of time now talking about Outlook. If you've installed the Office preview and you've poked around Outlook, you've probably been pretty unimpressed. When the preview first shipped in March, the most noticeable new feature was what? Weather. In the calendar app, we had weather. Since March, Microsoft's released a few updates, and they've given us a few more features, such as side-by-side calendars and proposed new meeting time. These are things we've wanted. That's great. But for the most part, it looks pretty much like Outlook 2011 with a facelift. But there's a few things you should know. Outlook is now sandboxed, and therefore its preferences and its files are now stored in a sandboxed location. Outlook 2011 kept its Microsoft user data folder in the users document folder. Outlook 2016 now keeps that data in a location registered by Apple to Microsoft. Notice that it's no longer in the documents folder, but rather it's in the user's hidden library folder. No longer should a user accidentally delete his mail data. He'd have to consciously navigate into that hidden library folder and dig down deep inside to be able to do that. Microsoft Entourage, Outlook's predecessor, introduced the monolithic database. Oh, how we hated the monolithic database. It was a pain to manage, it was unwieldy to back up, and it was prone to corruption. Does anybody miss those days? Outlook 2011 took us away from all that by splitting up the data from the database. That was a lot easier to manage and back up. It was still prone to corruption, though, every once in a while, but we had the database utility to take care of that. That's changed with Outlook 2016. It no longer stores mail data in a proprietary Microsoft database. It now uses SQLite, whose code is in the public domain and already installed on your Mac. SQLite enables any software developer to store and access database files without having to have a server. Apple uses SQLite to store a lot of its application information. Microsoft excluded the Outlook 2011 database from Time Machine backups because it was too big to copy without it changing in the middle of a backup. The SQLite database files are now much smaller, and Outlook is now Time Machine friendly. That means you shouldn't have to worry about a database rebuild after you restore from a backup. If your database gets corrupt, Outlook will handle the repair. It won't ask, it'll just do it. And there's no more database utility. I've been using Outlook 2016 since the early betas. I've yet to see a rebuild. That's personally just me, but I've yet to see a rebuild. Microphone, please? You had a rebuild? We have at least one person. Anybody else seen a rebuild? A couple of handfuls. All right.
Just out of curiosity, how much mail are we talking about here? We haven't had a rebuild. He says he has. Just to compare.
To be honest, I don't know what size my database is, but I usually keep a couple of Exchange accounts, probably 5 or 6 IMAP accounts, and a couple of POP, just because I like to kind of test and stress test. But I'm also not an email hoarder, so I regularly clean out my email. So a little bit of management probably goes a long way. So, and I also, I'm a laptop user, but I still shut my laptop down. I honestly think something like that helps day-to-day health of your Mac and anything else that's running on it. So that's just anecdotal for me. All right, so Microsoft's been trying to deprecate identities, which are now called profiles. And profiles are separate databases of mail data, similar to having different OS X users on a Mac system. Each profile is self-contained, and you can only connect to one at a time. In the past, if you'd use the database, utility to switch identities. Today, you have to locate the Profile Manager application found inside the Outlook application bundle to switch profiles, but it's still there. And finally, there's no more Microsoft Database Daemon. Microsoft actually found it was the primary cause of much of the database corruption, so now it's gone. The daemon was responsible not only for database maintenance, but it was also responsible for reminders. Reminders no longer appear without Outlook running. This is I heard good. I actually like hearing that response. But this is a trade-off that your users are going to have to make in order to, for the price of stability. So I'll talk quickly about automatically configuring email for your users. First, I'd hope to have a demo version of my Outlook Exchange setup script to show today. I don't have it ready. But after Microsoft made some changes to Outlook 2016, the automatic setup broke. However, I'm fairly confident after finally getting a little bit more information about everything that I can finally get that to working again. So if you're looking forward to using the Outlook Exchange setup script for Office 2016 or Outlook 2016, I should have that updated not too long from now. I strongly encourage you, though, to get Auto-Discover working in your Exchange environment if you can, and avoid using the script. That's really the reason it existed in the first place, although I do know some people are using Auto-Discover and the Exchange setup script simultaneously. But if you can, try to get Auto-Discover working, avoid the script. As for POP and IMAP setup, modifying the autoconfig DB file that's found inside the Outlook application bundle still works. You can add your organization's POP and IMAP email settings to this file so that users simply need to enter their name and their password, or the email address and their password to connect to their mail. Outlook will handle completing the server addresses, the ports, etc. This is not ideal because it means you're actually modifying a resource that Microsoft might change at some point in the future. Just letting you know it still works. Yes?
Is there no auto-discover functionality for IMAP account in Outlook?
Auto-discover, so he's asking, is there no auto-discover for IMAP or POP accounts? Auto-discover is a feature of Exchange. And so what's happening is when Outlook launches and the user puts in his or her email address, it's going out there and it's checking the Exchange server, and the Exchange server is handing back that information. Believe it or not, Auto-Discover was actually designed to work with POP and IMAP. Nobody's really taken it there yet.
I think what he's asking is that, like Apple's Mail, when you set up a POP or an IMAP account with say, your bill at earthlink.net,
Mm-hmm.
it goes out and it queries Apple and says, what should an earthlink.net account be?
No, it doesn't.
Versus having a file that's just resting on the computer.
So these are excellent questions here. So let's explain how this is working. So the question is, well, if I type in something like bill at earthlink.net, it's going out and it's checking and it's coming back with all the information. Outlook's not doing that. That's the this autoconfig DB file. If you go in and look at that, you'll find it probably in the Outlook bundle, contents, resources. If you look at that, it has probably a list of 200 different common servers. So if I were to put in a Gmail address, it would probably find that, auto-configure it. If I were to put in Comcast, that's in that list too. It would find it and configure it. My company is 318.com. My company has no server to help auto-configure anything, and my server information is not in this autoconfig DB file. However, if I modify that file and add my information, and all you have to do is just copy the Gmail, put it somewhere else, change the server address settings, at that point, when you deploy it out to your users, when they launch Outlook for the first time, they type in bill@318.com, and the password, it auto-discovers, in a sense, because it's auto-populating from this file here. Yes?
So if you were to modify that file, though, wouldn't you be breaking the signature of the
I thought that. He's asking, if you modify the file, aren't you breaking code signing? It didn't break. I actually have a feeling, I'm not sure, I'm not a developer, that code signing might actually just be referring to the Outlook binary. I don't know for sure, but I made sure and I went through and tested it. Yes, that should break it. I think that probably should be considered a bug.
What did you use to test it?
I put in my 318 information and
What text editor or
what text editor do I use to modify that? I'm a BB edit person and text wrangler person. So I can't guarantee that's going to necessarily always work, but it works now. I'm just trying to give you an alternative in case you need it. Yeah.
Can you configure this for the install package, or what do you configure after you install Office?
You're talking the DB file? Yeah, this is something that I'd probably package separately. So he's asking how to distribute this. I would go ahead and, if I'm using something like Casper, throw Outlook and Office and any of the updates into Casper, let that install it normally. I would package this file and let it overwrite what's there after the fact. And again, I'm not a fan of changing bits from manufacturers. It just still happens to work. Maybe someday I'll take that Exchange setup script and I'll modify it for POP and IMAP, something like that. I'd feel a lot better running that. Yes?
When you modify that XML file in the past, did you do something where you appended your information onto it, or did you?
Yeah. I wish I'd taken a screenshot of it so I could show you. It's literally a long list of XML. And every little blurb that you see in there is just a different server, a different company like Comcast, like Earthlink, like AOL, Hotmail, Gmail. It's just a long list of all the server settings that you'll find for all those common services, not your uncommon services like yourprivatecompany.com. Yes?
Isn't the intended purpose of AutoDiscover to look for a DNS entry of the form autodiscover.ftdn, and that's there pointing to the server?
Yes.
Modding this file would be a workaround if that's not going to exist.
Right. So what he was just asking is, isn't the purpose of AutoDiscover the service to go out, check DNS, or check the Exchange server, or however you've got one of the multiple ways of configuring this, and just return back whatever that information is? There's a TechNet article that actually says how AutoDiscover works. Basically, it's looking first for an address that's something like autodiscover.domain.com. And if it finds an XML file there, then it reads that XML file and it configures itself. Honestly, I haven't tried with an IMAP account putting something like that out there for that. It could work. I don't know. I'm not sure. All right, so that's autoconfig DB. So I'm not going to get into detail about this, but I did want to point out Outlook 2016 now supports Exchange Online Archive both with Office 365 and Exchange 2013. If you're not familiar with that feature, look into it. Exchange Online Archive requires your Exchange administrator to enable and configure archiving per user. He'll set the defaults to something like archive all mail that's 2 years old or older and move it to another mailbox. And that mailbox automatically appears in Outlook 2016 as a separate mailbox. So the difference between that is that mail does not sync. So it's searchable while Outlook is online and connected to Exchange, and the user can download archived email, but once Outlook quits, that cache gets deleted. So it's a fantastic method of trying to maintain a modicum of storage and manageability with old messages. And then my last word about Outlook is that we all want parity with Outlook for Windows. Who knows if we'll ever see that? The Apex group, however, is publicly asking customers to post their feature requests and to vote on them to help them prioritize what you guys want to see next. I encourage you to visit uservoice.com, review the feature requests. You get 10 votes. So vote up as many votes as you want per feature, and if you don't see something that you want, add your own feature there, and then let other people help vote that up. All right, now it's time to kill some unicorns. I stood here last year extolling the virtues of Office 2011 and how manageable it was using configuration profiles. I demonstrated how we could eliminate automatic updates and how all those startup and welcome screens the first time a user launches an application, all of that relied on P-lists. Apple's Profile Manager in Casper and practically any management server uses P-lists. From what I've found, practically every user configurable preference for Excel, OneNote, PowerPoint, and Word is now stored in a SQLite database file called Microsoft Registration DB. I think they went a little crazy with the SQLite here. Given that OS X's management system is based on P-lists, MCX, and configuration profiles, that means for the most part, Office 2016 is unmanageable. Even if we could cobble together some SQLite commands to change the settings in this file or simply copy over a pre-configured file to every user folder, we can't override the users from changing their own settings. And all we'd be doing is just resetting their defaults. So I've written a very sternly worded email to Microsoft about this. I'm afraid, though, it may be too late to change their design. Yes?
Is there or is there not a tilde missing at the beginning of that?
Tilde? Yes.
Is that really /library?
Nope, I've got that wrong. He's absolutely right. The path that I have here should have a tilde in front. This is a file that goes in each individual user folder. Thank you for catching that. Yes?
Just a quick question, it's somewhat related. What's the difference between group containers and then just containers? Because I know those are two folders that exist.
All right. So what's the difference between group containers and containers? This all has to do with sandboxing. Typically, if you're running a single app, like Apple Remote Desktop, that is sandboxed. And it lives in containers. So inside your home folder, the hidden library folder, there's another folder called containers. That's where preferences live for Apple Remote Desktop now. It's not in library preferences, it starts in containers. You start digging down into containers and eventually you'll find yet another library preferences where you'll actually find the preferences that you need to manage. So what's the difference between containers and group containers? Group containers are for applications that need to work together. So Office. If they had done everything the way I wanted, I told them, I swear, I told them all the stuff I wanted. They didn't give it to me. If they had done everything by putting the individual apps, Outlook and Excel and Word, into the containers folder so that they could have their own individual preferences, and then put preferences that they all share into the group containers folder, that would have been the ideal design for us. It's not that way. So there is a little bit of a bright star here. The lack of management applies only to the Office applications. So we do still have at least the ability to manage Microsoft Auto Update using a configuration profile. It's not sandboxed. And that way we can prevent the users from getting that prompt to update their Office when they're standard users. So for that, if you want to know how to do that, I'll point you to my presentation from last year. All right, just a quick note about shared files and resources, such as company letterheads that you might have in Word or branded slide decks that you might have in PowerPoint. If you launch Word 2016 and choose Word, Preferences, File Locations, your user has the ability to specify certain file locations for clip art or workgroup templates. You can place your organization's letterhead or your organization's fax cover letter. Everybody's still using faxes, right? Yeah. PowerPoint templates, custom Excel spreadsheets, anything localized to your company. You can put these in these locations so they appear in the user templates for all your users. Word is the only application where you can make this change. To create this location, navigate to the Office Group Container folder that's inside a user folder and locate this user content folder. You copy that user content folder to a common location, such as users shared, and then rename it to something, anything like shared files. Then give everyone read-write access to it, or maybe just give read permissions to everybody except for the manager of the department who has the ability to change something in that folder. Note that the subfolders have a hidden .localized file extension. You want to preserve that. So that's why I'm saying you want to copy this folder. Some of these folders, such as templates, need you to create subfolders for each application. And then when you've done that, save your company template files into each application folder. And the result of that is, when your users launch their application, they see the new Office Templates window. Your company templates appear here, right there in front of them. Now, I suggest you set this up for your users, but the preferences aren't really that easy to manage. You could probably, though, package that Microsoft Registration DB file and copy it along with the shared files onto all of your Macs, maybe as one way of deploying everything. Unfortunately, there's not going to be an easy way of doing that. You're already deploying the shared files. If you feel like it, go ahead and grab that Microsoft registration database, throw it out there too. You can pre-configure that and it should work.
Shouldn't the proper way be though to like edit the database using the simple like commands that are out there?
Good question. So he's asking, well, shouldn't we just be modifying the database to do all of this? I would say, yeah. I'm not a developer, I'm not a programmer. I could probably eventually figure it out. I knowplists. My Casper server knows plists. Profile Manager knows plists. It should be in plist format.
It should.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right. Can we modify this file using SQLite commands? More than likely so. If you go into the terminal, you can type in SQLite3, and you'll see the SQL application. Get a GUI app for SQLite. It's not that bad, but when I looked in this particular database, I actually wanted to do that for this presentation. I wanted to give a way of modifying this. Databases are pretty simple. However, the structure of the databases can be pretty nasty and hairy. This one's nasty and hairy because it's got practically all the preferences for all the applications outside of Outlook in it. And you'd have to find basically the key and the value for everything you want to manage. And from what I saw, they weren't necessarily straightforward, named straightforward. But definitely, I agree. If you're somebody who doesn't mind delving into SQLite, you want to figure it out, take a chance. Let us know what happens. All right. Lastly, let's talk a little bit about scripting and automation. And in particular, I'm talking about AppleScript and add-ins, such as Excel add-ins. Remember, Office applications are now self-contained and sandboxed. And Microsoft is no longer providing automator actions for Office. The AppleScript menu in each application is gone now too. That doesn't mean the applications aren't scriptable. They still are very scriptable. You can open the script editor application though, and you can enable the system-wide AppleScript menu. If you create folders for each Office application and then place your scripts in there, you'll see only your scripts that work with that application. This is a feature that's been around in OS X for several versions. It's very well documented. If I haven't quite explained it here, which I realize how convoluted it looks right now, you can definitely figure this out by searching Apple's site and what to do here. But you may have to do a little rewriting depending on what processes you're calling. Sandboxing is going to affect how your Apple scripts interact with multiple applications. So depending on what you're trying to do, running a script from within one application may or may not let you transfer information or control another application that's also sandboxed. Functionality isn't broken. That's important to realize. Functionality is not broken, but you have to play by stricter rules. And before deploying Office 2016 to production, test any and all of your Apple scripts and your add-ins. Make sure they work. So history shows Office has been around as early as the Macintosh, but Apple's thrown Microsoft a few curveballs by re-architecting not only the operating system, but the hardware platform. And they did all that kind of in a relatively short time. Microsoft's catching up with Office 2016 by completely rewriting it in Xcode. While we may not see new features in the applications themselves, the rework done under the hood in both Office applications and Outlook in particular is substantial. That rework, though, requires some trade-offs, such as the lack of reminders while Outlook is not running, and the lack, unfortunately, of manageability at this point. Most of the functionality our users are needing are still going to be there, but we're going to have to figure out different ways of managing some of this. So at that point, open to the floor. Questions? Yes? So the question is, the calendar functionality in Outlook seems very slow compared to a larger calendar, having a lot of events and appointments. To be honest, I don't have that many events and appointments. I can't tell you from personal experience if it feels slower or faster for me. To me, it's as fast as it was in Outlook 2011. I can't by any means say that I'm a power user when it comes to email, though. I just don't send and receive 500 emails. I don't have 15 appointments or meetings a week to be able to make that judgment call. I don't know. So the question is, are they using a different protocol for a calendar? And if you're using Exchange, the protocol is still Exchange Web Services, EWS. That hasn't changed. It's been modified a little bit. It's been updated both on the server side as well as in this version of Outlook. So because of some of those changes, that's why we're getting a little bit more functionality that's working now. So hopefully it'll get better. I have no idea about CardDAV or CalDAV, unfortunately. Yes? So what he's asking is, given the size of the installer package, has anybody, or of the footprint of all the installed applications, has anybody experimented with deploying just one or two? You can definitely do that. You're not going to break anything. So what's going to happen right now with what we know, I don't know much about the future, but this is just a preview. This is not saying this is a preview for volume license customers. It's not saying it's a preview for Office 365 in particular. This is just a preview that we can look at. I have a feeling, we already know there's going to be a volume license version of Office 2016. Microsoft has said that. If you'll be able to do choice changes, I don't know. Or if you'll be able to download individual apps from the Volume License Service Center, possibly. We don't know. Yeah.
So have you looked at the installer package? Have you picked that apart to see if they're individual?
Yeah. You can look at it through, you can look at the Office 2016 installer, and you can see the choices are there.
The choices
So,
are there,
but my
as
record,
with some other previous distribution packages, is it possible to just extract the individual sub-packages?
oh. Is it possible to extract sub-packages from the installer? Yes. If you've got the technology and the wherewithal to do it, go for it. It's not going to be supported though. But if that's the way you want to try to deploy it, you can. So there was somebody here. Yes? 2016 for iOS? It's not going to be called 2016 for iOS, but they did actually release an iOS version update just a few months ago. So there's an interesting change that happened in Apex. I'm not sure I can necessarily talk about it, but to give the basis of the change, features, how something works across platform is one of their centralized focuses now, instead of working on something per platform. So their goal is to try to make one feature on one platform work like like the same feature on another platform, like the same feature on another platform. So there is an iOS version for iPhone and iPad, or iOS version. Yes, there is. Mm-hmm. You know, it's already out there right now. It's free. However, it's free to read any Office document. If you sign in with a free Microsoft account like Hotmail, then you get the ability to modify most of what you can do in that application on the iOS device. If you sign in with an Office 365 account, which is a paid account, you unlock all the features. So what am I getting at here? PowerPoint, that's probably the best example. If you don't pay for it, you don't log into PowerPoint on your iPad, you can read a PowerPoint presentation. If you log in with a Microsoft Hotmail account, a free account, you can now modify that application mostly. But you have to log in with an Office 365 account to get Presenter View. So they've tiered the level of features that you're going to get. So, over here, I saw you next. Yes? Say that one more time, I'm sorry? So the question is there a way of deduplicating all that bloated software, all those different versions of fonts, all that shared resources stuff? No, there's not. The applications are designed now to run standalone. So one app, trash it, that's everything. There's nothing else getting installed in library or anywhere else. It's all in that app. It has to be there. Yes?
Sir, have you seen any signs being able to suppress the setup assistant? The first run?
So there's not really a setup assistant anymore. I make a big deal now that we don't have the ability to manage Office, but there's no more prompting you to look at the latest features. There's no more prompting you to join the customer experience program. Is what? Right. In the Office preview, I have not seen what's new Windows. That's not to say they won't come.
Those are the kind of things you would want to get rid of.
Right.
I mean,
Right. We really won't know what we're going to have to deal with as far as after we deploy something to our users until we actually see the volume license version.
In the SQLite database, there is a hide welcome dialog.
So I hear somebody. Where are you at?
Right here.
Right here. Oh, yes, thanks.
So I was looking for the database.
Yeah.
There is a hide welcome dialog.
Is there? All right. And so,
You might be able to set, it looks like the Windows registry. It says HD current
yes.
user.
All the preferences, even if you look at, so Harry's actually saying he's looked inside the SQLite database file, that Microsoft registration file. That's the one you're referring to. And he's seeing, it looks modifiable. So, and he's right that all the keys and the values in there, the keys are in kind of the form of Windows registry settings. It was that way in the P list for Office 2011 too. Yes?
Did you have a chance to look at Active Directory integration, how single sign-on works like on Windows machines that once you sign in into a profile, just by logging in, that it automatically gets the user and all of that, and then you don't have to configure anything in Outlook anymore.
Right. So the question is, if I'm using single sign-on with Active Directory, is there any way to get Outlook to auto-configure itself and just work that way? No, there's not. However, Outlook is Kerberized. So if your Macs are bound to Active Directory and everything is properly configured, yes, once your account is set up, you should be able to say, don't use password, just use your system settings.
Just like in 2.11.
Exactly. That should work. I've never been in an environment to use that.
It works in 2.11 that way, but not
Okay.
automatically.
You have to set it.
Choose go to Kerberos and you're
That's right. You have to set that manually. Yes?
One thing I noticed was that each application has to have its own updates, it doesn't update Office.
That's right.
So it's a game for each update.
That's absolutely right. The comment that he's making is each application now is individually updated. You can literally run Word 15.10.0 next to Excel 15.12 if it ever comes out. I'm not sure what version it's up to. But you can literally have mismatched versions of your applications. It's going to be very important that you no longer try to figure out what version of Office you have installed. You're going to have to figure out what version of Word you have installed, and what version of Excel you have installed, and what version of PowerPoint you have installed. That's where those receipts are going to come in really handy. At the microphone. Thank you.
So my question is, have you tested this with like PIV or CAC card and encryption
Oh, no.
of emails with, yeah, awesome.
Yeah, I
That's
haven't
gonna be
tested
so much
any of the
fun.
security features in Outlook. I honestly don't know what's supported and what's not. I would find it very hard to believe that what was supported isn't carrying through to the future. I would actually expect to see more support for security, but I haven't heard anything. I don't know.
Yeah, unfortunately, encrypted email with PIV card and stuff like that, it doesn't know. I mean, you can put in your PIN, and then sometimes it'll ask you to put in your PIN again, and it's messy.
All I can say is sternly worded email to Microsoft and
Yeah.
use the uservoice.com.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, thank you. And next.
What's your take on the overall stability of 2016 compared to 2011, especially with the rewrite? Any changes to the auto recovery?
Oh, to the as far as the Outlook database is concerned?
Or actually, Word in particular?
Oh, Word. I don't know. What's the change? I haven't seen. I haven't had too many stability problems. However, I've been running betas, and I've been running those betas probably a few versions ahead of you guys. Yes, I see problems all the time, but they're not necessarily stability problems. They're kind of weird problems I expect to happen. So stability, I can't say. Even in the early betas, I did find crashes. I didn't have very many. Corruption in documents, I didn't have very many. I feel it's probably more stable, but that's anecdotal.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
On MacAdmins.com, and it focused mostly on Outlook, but like they did a lot of tests on speed.
Yeah. There's been a lot of speed focus in Outlook. As far as the applications are concerned, what you see in the preview quite often still has a lot of debugging type code in it. If it's anything like it was in the Office 2011 betas, whenever it's finally released, you should be able to see those apps speed up because that debugging code is going to get removed.
Okay.
Alrighty? And yes,
Yeah.
you said you were going to do this to me.
No. The is the group containers, is that ID that is the
That is
the path?
unique.
Well, is it unique for each installation, or is it just
No.
unique for Office?
That is
at
unique to Microsoft.
Okay.
So
So mine would be the same as yours, as would be the
Right.
same as somebody else's.
Right.
Okay.
I would expect other applications like Microsoft Remote Desktop to also use that if there's a need for it to use it. I don't know, but that number that you saw in the path should be unique to Microsoft Office, I believe.
Okay.
Or Microsoft, I don't remember which.
And the second question, the updates that are delivered today for the Office applications are essentially full installers?
It looks like it, yeah.
Is there any indication from Microsoft that we might get an update that might be smaller than a gig?
Let me go shake my ball here real quick. All signs point to I don't know. So that's actually a great question. Will these, if you've installed the Office preview and then you've run auto update and it's updated your applications, it really does look like it's individually downloading brand new bits, the entire bundle, and installing that over and over. I've asked that question. I have not gotten a good answer. If I had, I couldn't tell you. So we'll know soon, imminently. Yes?
Have you seen any changes to how they handle temporary files?
I don't really do much support with temporary files. So the question is, have I seen any changes with how temporary files are handled? I don't do enough support to know. I know there's like the tilde files and they're hidden, but no, I haven't seen anything as far as that's concerned. I do know in that one window in Word that I was pointing everybody to so that you could point people to workgroup templates, there is a place where you can specify those temporary files. It's blank by default, so I'm assuming that it goes to a default location inside the user's folder, but it might be something that you could point somewhere else and see. I'm not sure. Yes?
A follow-up to her question. Thank you for asking that, because it reminded me of a user that I have that has problems with files that are on certain servers that and when they're connecting to those servers.
Oh, that's a good question.
And when they're working with files that are on the server versus locally on their hard drive, then they're having problems and it gets messy. And
there's no developer that I've seen to date, like Adobe or Microsoft, that's ever said they'll ever support working off of a server anyway. Obviously, that's not real world.
Right.
But I'm really hoping that we don't see that problem that we've seen where you have to have that hidden temporary items folder or something like that at the root of a drive. I haven't tested with the server. I don't know.
yeah. Okay, thanks.
I have a follow-up to that.
All right.
I have been testing that because I have a lot of new users in my environment.
We've got somebody testing it. Fantastic.
That are AD based and have recently switched to Mac.
All right. So they're Active Directory based, and where are their home folders? On the server or are their home folders local? Okay. So portable home folders. Okay. Okay.
So I've actually noticed that I've actually got some of my users using the Mac preview for
All
this
right.
reason alone, because they're not getting that pop-up that states that
So
you
it's
have permission
it,
to this file.
so you've got some of your users who are using portable home folders on servers. They're using Office 2016 because the experience is better.
Yes.
Excellent. I like hearing that. You're seeing the same thing? That's good to hear. I did not know that. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Yeah. And what was that? Not without its challenges. You're right. You're absolutely right. Yes.
A question, more of a comment.
We've got a comment.
Yeah, it was. So I don't know if anyone wants to use Outlook or has wanted to use an alternative to
I like Outlook.
Apple Mail, Calendar, and Contacts.
Mm-hmm.
But currently, Microsoft doesn't support CalDev or CardDev.
Right. Currently, Microsoft does not support CalDev and CardDev. Very correct.
I found out about that user voice, site a couple of weeks ago. There are currently 2 feature requests regarding, adding functionality for.
I saw that too.
And if anyone wants to use Outlook and they don't want to deal with Apple's open tools,
Mm-hmm.
I recommend that you
So
build them up.
he's bringing up a very good point about that uservoice.com website. there is definitely that feature request out there for CardDAV and CalDAV support in Outlook. And if I remember right, it's got a pretty high vote.
Yeah.
And if I also remember right, it's marked as under review. That's probably just to appease us. I don't know.
I can tell you because I've used those feedback pages before for other products that they have,
Mm-hmm.
and they're pretty good. I mean, it's not instant always,
Right.
but
But
they do listen and they do respond after some time. You know.
nice.
And I know because they had another forum on, I don't even know what message board it was, but it was a Microsoft one, and one of the MVP members said it'll probably be a couple of years before that gets. I'm like, what couple of years? Like,
Yeah.
We can't wait a
So,
couple of years for something like this. That's standard
He's
now.
making the comment that he's been using the user voice for other Microsoft applications and services. They're out there for, like, I think Office 365 and a couple of other things at least. He said that the response there by Microsoft has actually been pretty good. Again, I think that's, some of it's to appease us, but hey, we're getting a response. We see somebody at Microsoft has flipped the switch and said, I see you, customer, and hear what you have to say. So, anyone else? Thank you.